Joining us here to discuss more on these developments is Middle East Affairs analyst Jared Filiti. He's also an attorney specializing in international law and human rights. Jared, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
To start with, I'd like your view on Netanyahu's warning to the UN that we just heard earlier. What do you think that statement says about his next steps in this war?
Netanyahu's statement acknowledges where we are in reality, that there is a state of war between Hezbollah and Israel, and that the United Nations should not be in a position where it is being used or manipulated into being targets. The members of the UNFIL team who are still in southern Lebanon are prudent to evacuate and not be in the line of fire in an active war zone. Peacekeepers have a role, but their role is not to be involved in active combat. So what we see from Prime Minister Netanyahu is an acknowledgement of the state of war that exists between Hezbollah and Israel, and one that is not likely to end anytime soon.
Netanyahu also says that Hezbollah uses these troops as human shields. He also says the IDF has asked for these evacuations before and was refused. Why would the UN not want to pull these personnel from the area?
The UN is very much a political body that is subject to the whims of the countries on the Security Council that control these troops. And many of these countries are not friends of Israel. Many of these countries don't care if there are people or whether it's civilians or United Nations forces in harm's way. Ultimately, they claim to be there for the better good. However, what we're seeing is that they are being used to shield Hezbollah terrorists. We see that Hezbollah has constructed tunnels with 100 meters of UN observation posts, which is ridiculous to think that the United Nations has not seen how Hezbollah has been preparing for war. If anything, the UN forces can be said to be assisting Hezbollah in the run-up to this war rather than doing anything to keep the peace. So what we see here is the reality. The reality is that the United Nations has not been unbiased. You're seeing on screen now a very tunnel which was found within sight of the United Nations forces. So this calls into question the impartiality of UN troops and whether they are being willfully or negligently being manipulated to be in a situation that is beneficial to a terrorist organization.
And speaking of Hezbollah, Jared, I'd like your thoughts on this soundbite, which we'll play now.
Another thing that I want to emphasize is how much we close to the UN base in your right. It's less than 200 meters from us. Actually, we are standing in a military base of Hezbollah, very close to the UN.
And these Hezbollah tunnels were found just 200 meters from a UN station. These couldn't possibly have been planned, mapped out, and dug in a very short period of time. What does this say to you?
The UN has been there since 1978. They're very much complicit in allowing Hezbollah to position itself militarily in southern Lebanon, just as they have been in Gaza. We saw with UNRWA, UN schools were being used to facilitate tunnel access by Hamas. The same thing is what we're seeing in Lebanon. We're seeing the United Nations being used by Hezbollah as cover for their terrorist operations and to prepare for war. It's ridiculous to think that the United Nations is impartial in these countries, and it's very dangerous for its forces to continue to be there.
And Jared, on the topic of American involvement, the latest is the THAAD system and 100 U.S. troops being sent to Israel. Is this significant?
It is significant. It shows America's continued commitment to the security of Israel and the anticipation that we may well see another round of ballistic missiles that will be launched at Israel, whether from Iran or from proxies like the Houthis in Yemen or from Syria or from Iraq. Ultimately, the United States has made clear the position of this government to support the state of Israel. And that means that right now, when the principal threat from Iran is not just terrorism, but missiles, this missile system will help protect Israeli civilian lives from another barrage of terror.
And finally, before we go, a focus on Iran. We have heard the Iranian foreign minister say there are no red lines when it comes to defending Iran's interests. What are you expecting next from Iran?
Since the Iranian Revolution in 1979, it has been a state committed to the destruction of the state of Israel. What we expect is what we're seeing and what we continue to see. Iran using its proxies, its terrorist organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah, as well as direct military intervention to attack Israel. So we can expect right now that after Israel retaliates for the last round of missiles that came from Iran, Iran may very well escalate and continue finding new ways to launch missiles at Israel or to threaten the Gulf countries that that have been supportive or at least have stood against Iran, countries that are responsible for a lot of the oil output that we see in the world. So there is a threat of regional instability that is posed by Iran and its continuing military adventurism.
Middle East affairs analyst Jared Falidi, thank you for your insights.
Thank you.